September 29, 2017. Tony Parsons stepped off the train at Fort William. It was 4:12 p.m. He wore a bright yellow cycling jacket, the kind meant to catch headlights. In one hand, his helmet. In the other, a crumpled map. He told his wife not to wait up. Tony had done a lot in his 63 years. Raised 2 sons, buried 1. He survived rough waters in the Navy. He thought he could handle the Highlands. But Scotland that evening was colder than forecasted. The wind came in low. And still, he pedaled out of that station, alone, toward a mountain road that doesn't forgive mistakes. By 6:02 p.m., CCTV caught him outside a gas station. He bought water, nodded at the cashier, said something about pushing through the night. That was the last confirmed moment anyone ever saw him alive. There was no crash, no call, just silence. The kind of silence that families don't recover from. For years passed. Then, a woman came forward, not with evidence, but with a story that started with love and ended at a shallow grave, on a cold stretch of road only locals know. The man they'd all been searching for was never a stranger to everyone. On September 29, 2017, a Friday in the Scottish Highlands, at exactly 9:06 a.m., Tony Parsons boarded a train from Tillicoultry to Fort William. He carried only a small backpack, a mountain bike that rattled with every jolt of the rail car, and a promise to raise money for homeless veterans, men he once called brothers. He was 63. He'd undergone knee surgery just months before. But he said this ride wasn't about speed. It was about proving something to himself. In his jacket pocket, tucked beneath a Ziploc bag of energy bars and pain medication, was a handwritten list of donor names. And just under it, a photo of his son at graduation, folded twice, worn at the creases. To most, Tony was a retired petty officer who volunteered on weekends and fixed bikes for kids in the neighborhood. But at home, he was something else entirely. His wife, Denise Parsons, a 58-year-old school librarian, remembered that morning too well. She had stood at the kitchen sink drying his water bottle when he told her, "It's only 170 kilometers. A few hills. I'll be back before you miss me." She smiled, but her hands trembled. She didn't say it then, but she had a dream the night before. Tony, lost in a valley, calling out, and no one answering. Their son Malcolm, just 22, had offered to follow him in the car. Tony refused. He called it a man's ride. At 4:12 p.m., Tony was caught on CCTV leaving the Fort William train station. Helmet strapped. No reflective gear. He waved to the station attendant, adjusted the sagging saddle of his old mountain bike, and rode into the wind. The road ahead wasn't gentle. He knew that. He also knew sunset would come at 6:58 p.m., which gave him less than 3 hours of light and more than 170 kilometers of raw, uneven land to cover. What he didn't know was that he'd never see his front door again. At 6:03 p.m. on September 29, 2017, CCTV footage caught a man in fluorescent gear pedaling slowly past a petrol station in Speenbridge. It was the last clear image anyone would see of Tony Parsons. The sky was already bruising. Dusk settles fast in the Highlands, and that night, it settled with a weight. He wasn't an experienced cyclist. He wasn't dressed for the cold that was coming. But he was moving, deliberate, hunched over his mountain bike, as if trying to outrun something no one else could see. Locals recall the image, a lone man against towering hills, his rear light blinking weakly in the dark. A slow figure swallowed by the A82, one of the most unforgiving stretches of road in all of Scotland. Past the petrol station, the climb begins. The ascent into Glencoe isn't steep at first, but it's endless. Twisting roads. No guardrails. On one side, cliffs. On the other, black water. And no cell service for miles. By 7 p.m., the sun was gone. By 8 o'clock, the temperature dropped to just above freezing. And still, no sign of Tony stopping. Some believe he walked parts of it, pushing the bike uphill, boots scraping gravel. Others say he was seen again hours later, but nothing can be confirmed. Then, at 11:20 p.m., a trucker claimed to have spotted a cyclist near Bridge of Orkney. Not pedaling, just standing, off the road, watching headlights pass. The witness didn't stop. No one else saw him. The road from there leads to Tyndrum. Cameras should have caught him, but they didn't. No man, no bike, just darkness and questions. Why would a man in his 60s, just months out of knee surgery, choose this route at this hour without backup or proper gear? Why did he tell no one where he planned to stop that night? Was he truly trying to get home? Or was he trying to leave something behind? At 11:31 p.m., the staff at the Bridge of Orkney Hotel were closing down. One bartender, Callum Hayes, 39, remembers a man standing just inside the entrance. Wet shoes, reflective bands, dirt on his shins. He wasn't asking for directions. He wasn't making conversation. He just stood at the far end of the bar, quietly nursing a glass of water. No food, no alcohol, just silence. His phone was in his hand, but no one ever saw him use it. Phone logs later revealed his last activity was a missed call at 6:48 p.m. After that, nothing. No text, no data, no outgoing signal. By 11:50 p.m., the man in question was seen again, this time by a lorry driver just past the old stone bridge. The driver said he clocked a lone cyclist pedaling against the cold. Head down. No light. Just a flicker of high-vis caught in the curve of his headlights. But then, nothing. Tyndrum was only 10 kilometers down the road. And there's a camera there. Fixed. Digital. Facing the A82. It records every passing vehicle. Every face. Every movement. It never caught him. No Tony. No bike. No shadow. Police reviewed 72 hours of footage. No glitch. No failure. The camera worked. He never passed. There's a footpath off that road. Locals call it the back way. It breaks off just before the first bend, used by hikers, campers, and the occasional reckless cyclist. It's easy to miss in the dark. But if he took that turn, we don't know. There were no tire tracks. No belongings. No sightings. Just a name. And the question it leaves behind. Why did Tony Parsons, 63 years old, freshly recovered from surgery, take a detour through some of the most isolated land in Scotland? Tony Parsons had promised Denise he'd be cautious. I won't push it, he said that morning. If I'm tired, I'll stop. But now it was 7:45 a.m. on September 30th. The sun had climbed, the kettle had whistled, and their bed was still untouched. At 8:01 a.m., Denise called the police. They told her what they tell most people on the first morning. He's probably fine. Maybe he's resting somewhere. Maybe his phone died. But Denise knew better. Tony always called, even when there was nothing to say. Still, protocol took over. His name went into the database. Male. 63. Last seen cycling south from Fort William. But with no signs of distress, he was marked low priority. No helicopters. No canine units. Not yet. So Denise acted alone. By midday, she had emailed every inn and guest house along the A82. By dusk, her son Malcolm had uploaded a missing poster on Facebook. That night, they printed 40 more and drove north. One by one, they taped them to trees, fences, bus stops. And they waited. Malcolm didn't sit still. By October 2nd, he had started a thread called Find My Dad. Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. He mapped Tony's presumed route mile by mile, highlighted CCTV gaps, time-stamped every verified sighting. His inbox flooded with strangers offering theories. Some helped, some didn't. There was the trucker who swore he passed a man pushing a mountain bike near Tyndrum at midnight. The bartender who insisted Tony only drank water. A hiker claimed he saw a man camped off the West Highland Way, but couldn't be sure of the face. The police followed leads, slowly. They logged interviews. They reviewed hours of gas station footage. Nothing pointed to foul play. Nothing pointed anywhere. Then came the stillness. The kind of silence that sets in when a case doesn't move. Days became weeks. The news cycle forgot him. But Denise didn't. Every time the phone rang, her stomach clenched. Every time she saw headlights in the window, she stood. And every time a body was discovered in the Highlands, a hiker, a camper, a drifter, they paused everything. The Parsons would wait on the edge of a name, a watch, a wallet, and then it wasn't him. And the grief started all over again. But it was something else, something colder, that began to creep in. Doubt. Because Tony was a good man. But even good men can carry secrets. And there was something in his silence, in the choices he made, that began to trouble Malcolm. Why did his father leave so late? Why didn't he stay at the hotel? Why hadn't anyone found the bike? Malcolm rewound the timeline again and again. He noticed gaps, small ones, but enough to raise questions. He created a private document titled Unlikely Scenarios. Number 1 was, he meant to disappear. Number 2, Someone helped him disappear. But number 3 was darker. It simply read, he didn't disappear. Someone made him vanish. And late one evening, 4 weeks after the ride, Malcolm stood on the edge of the A82 with a flashlight and a drone in his backpack. He wasn't searching anymore. He was investigating. By winter 2017, the official investigation had grown cold, not because they had found peace, but because they'd found nothing. Police had hoped Tony Parsons' smartphone or fitness tracker would offer guidance. A breadcrumb trail, a digital footprint. But his GPS data had cut out near the edge of Bridge of Orkney, right where cell service thinned and questions multiplied. Some officers theorized that he'd taken the A82 straight toward Tyndrum. Others wondered if, at some point, he veered onto the West Highland Way, a quiet walking route just before the village, shrouded in forest, barely lit, and far off the main road. If he turned left instead of right, he would have vanished into a part of the Highlands where even echoes don't return. A few locals thought they saw something. A pair of strange tire marks, just off a trailhead, near an abandoned lay-by. A set of drag lines through thin gravel, cut sharp at the edge of the clearing. But there was no follow-up. No photographs. No logged statement. Just another almost. And time passed. Slowly at first, then like fog over the loch, silent and total. Malcolm updated his father's website weekly at first, then monthly. By the second spring, he stopped counting. Denise kept the porch light on for 3 years. By the fourth, she forgot to replace the bulb. Every few months, someone would call. A skeleton found in a ravine. Tattered clothes found under a bridge. Each time, they braced. Each time, it wasn't him. And then, 4 years later, September 29th, 2021. Just before dawn, a hunter named Rory Dent was tracking red deer through a patch of woodland just east of Bridge of Orkney. He stepped off the trail to relieve himself. That's when he saw it. Something buried shallow, disturbed. A single hiking boot sticking out of the soil. A broken femur. Police sealed off the area within the hour. The press said it was a breakthrough. But Denise? She didn't celebrate. She just sat quietly at the edge of her bed, holding Tony's wedding ring in her palm like a weight she hadn't known she'd been carrying. The news didn't say it. Not yet. But the implication was clear. This wasn't a fall. This wasn't exposure. Someone had buried him. And under the earth, next to what was once a man, lay a rusted pedal, a snapped helmet buckle, and 2 things that didn't belong to him. A half-empty bottle of Red Bull, and a torn receipt dated 1 week after Tony disappeared. What happened on that road in 2017 didn't end in a ditch. It ended in silence. May 22nd, 2021, on that cold spring morning. A local hunter was tracking deer in a dense patch of woodland near Tyndrum, about 400 meters off the old West Highland Way. It had rained the night before. The moss was soft. The sky was quiet. And that's when he saw it. Fabric, wedged under a rusted drainage pipe. Earth-packed, weather-worn, torn at the sleeve. A military-style jacket. The man bent down, brushed the mud away with his glove. And that's when he saw it. A faded patch, barely hanging on by its last threads. Chief. The call to police came in at 7:38 a.m. By 10:45, the scene was cordoned off. By sundown, the remains were confirmed to be human. Forensics would take another week. But the family was told within hours. They were fairly confident it was Tony Parsons. The DNA confirmation came on May 28th. It was Tony. The jacket, the dental records, the worn shoes. The crushed cell phone that hadn't pinged since September 29th, 2017. All of it pointed to one thing. The ride had ended here. But how? The autopsy didn't take long to raise alarms. There were no fractures in the wrists or forearms, no sign of a fall break. The front of the skull was intact. But the back? Caved. Blunt force trauma. No defensive wounds. And the terrain where his body lay? No cliffs. No rocks. No evidence of a bicycle crash. There was no bicycle. The path was off-grid, rarely traveled. A place one would never just happen to fall into. And yet Tony's remains, decomposed, scattered, yet unmistakably him, were placed there. Not dumped. Not thrown. Left. The forensic lead said it plainly. This wasn't a cycling accident. He didn't fall. He was struck. Back in Tillicountry, Denise didn't cry when she heard. She sat still in the kitchen. Malcolm pressed record on his camera without thinking. He wanted to document the truth, whatever it was. But all the lens captured was his mother staring at the floor, whispering the same words over and over. He came home. But if Tony Parsons was killed, then someone had been living with that secret for 4 years. Quietly, deliberately, without a trace. October 3rd, 2021. It had been 4 years since Tony Parsons disappeared into the darkness of the Highlands. 4 years of unanswered calls, unreturned birthdays, and a chair that stayed empty at every holiday dinner. Then, quietly, almost like it didn't want to be noticed, new evidence surfaced. 2 names, DeMarco and Kian Lattimore. Brothers, local laborers. The kind who never stuck around long enough for anyone to really know them. What they did leave behind, though, was a trail, thin, scattered, but not invisible. They'd once been charged in a bar assault 2 towns over. The case collapsed after a key witness recanted. But the violence, people remembered. Not in stories. In bruises. The first break came from an old, degraded CCTV file. A clerk at a roadside supply station had archived footage before upgrading his system. In the corner of the frame, timestamp 12:04 a.m., a van pulls into frame. 2 men. One climbs out, stretches his neck like he's sore. The other doesn't speak. A receipt confirmed it. A bus ticket purchased at 12:03 a.m., Kian's name. Destination, Glasgow. The police matched that ticket to a known alias. And then came the second fracture in the story. Cell tower logs. A mobile device pinged at 11:58 p.m. near the turnoff by Glen Etive, the same area where a hunter would later find Tony's remains. The van? Recovered. But not where it should have been. An anonymous tip led officers to a scrapyard 40 miles south, where the vehicle had already been crushed and logged as waste metal. Its VIN number, scorched and filed, still registered to a relative of DeMarco. Then, the clincher. Boots recovered from a cousin's shed during a separate search warrant. Mud-caked. Torn laces. Dried flecks under the heel. Blood. DNA confirmed it. Tony's. When police approached the brothers in a routine follow-up, neither ran. Neither asked for a lawyer. Both shrugged. Said they hadn't seen anything that night. And then something quiet happened. Malcolm sat in his car, outside the station. He stared at the building, holding the folder of his father's last known route. Handwritten maps, screenshots, photos from that final week. He didn't get out. He just watched. The people inside might know what happened. But no one was speaking. And the bike? Still missing. Maybe it was dumped. Maybe buried. Or maybe kept as a trophy. He called himself Malik now. Not DeMarco. Not the boy who once shared a bunk bed in a housing project with paint-chipped walls and sirens outside every night. Malik was new. A name he chose for quiet. For distance. For a second chance. He'd moved 300 miles south. A town just outside Montgomery, small enough to disappear, big enough not to raise eyebrows. Rented a modest 2-bedroom with faded shutters. Took a job at a car detailing shop. Always stayed late. Paid in cash. No credit cards. No chatter. Then came Tiara, 26. Certified nursing assistant. A woman who had stopped looking for love after her last one nearly cost her everything. Her job, her health, her sense of self. But Malik was different. He didn't push. Didn't pry. He fixed her cabinet hinge without being asked. Warmed her car at 5 a.m. before she left for the morning shift. Showed up when he said he would, and never raised his voice. Ever. She told her friends he was quiet. Not withdrawn, just careful. She never pushed him about the past. And he gave her only fragments. That he had a brother. That he moved here for a fresh start. Nothing more. And she didn't need more. Because after years of being bruised and doubted, silence felt like safety. Until that night. Friday, 9:14 p.m. They were walking home from a movie, hands tucked in their jacket pockets. She was mid-laugh, telling him about a scene she loved. And that's when the police cruiser passed. Slow, deliberate. No lights, no siren. Just headlights sweeping the sidewalk. Malik didn't flinch. He froze. A pause so still, even the wind felt like it avoided him. His gaze followed the car. Not with fear, but with the kind of alert you see in a hunted animal. His shoulders tightened. His jaw locked. The air around him seemed to change temperature. Tiara noticed. She stopped walking. "You good?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah." But his hand wouldn't stop shaking. They walked the rest of the way in silence. That night, while he showered, Tiara sat at the edge of their bed, replaying every moment of that look. Not panic. Not surprise. Something practiced. A memory flickered. Her ex, once lying to her face with the same soft voice, the same calm hands. And for the first time in nearly a year, she wondered if Malik was also just another story in disguise. He didn't tell her in one night. It came in fragments, in unfinished sentences, between dishes, after movies, at the edge of sleep. He never used the word murder, never said body. Just, the guy wouldn't stop running his mouth. My brother hit him first. I just cleaned up. But Tierra heard more in what he didn't say. No robbery, no plan, and definitely not random. She didn't press, not right away, but something lodged inside her. A weight, a shape, growing. 3 weeks passed. Then one cold Sunday afternoon, he said, "Let me show you something." They drove northeast, beyond where cell towers faded and the GPS stuttered, past fenced farmland and forgotten trails, under a sky so still it almost warned them. They parked near an old fence, walked through brush. His steps were quiet, deliberate. Finally, he stopped near a wooded slope, half concealed by briars and damp leaves. He pointed, flatly. "This is it," he said. "This is where we left him." No tears, no tremble, just the wind in the trees. Tierra didn't speak. She didn't scream or turn. She simply reached into her purse, took out the empty Red Bull can from the ride up, and placed it carefully on a flat stone near the base of the slope. Not as a marker for police. Not yet. But for herself. So she would never forget the spot, or the silence that followed. Later that night, she lay awake listening to the soft hum of the space heater. He was asleep beside her. She watched the ceiling and whispered to herself, "God, what do I do with this?" For weeks passed. She didn't speak to detectives, didn't call a tip line. She waited, watched him, tried to believe in the man who made her coffee, who fixed the porch light, who said he loved her in quiet ways. But every time a cruiser passed their street, he stopped breathing, and she started counting the days. The Red Bull can stayed there, half buried under moss, dulled by frost and November rain. A marker, not for the dead, but for memory, for guilt. She went back twice. Once after work, sitting in the driver's seat, headlights cutting through the trees, unsure if she wanted to be seen. And again, alone, on New Year's Eve. Midnight passed without fireworks, just wind and silence. She didn't cry, not then, but something had shifted, not just in him, in her, the man she prayed with, the man who pressed his hand gently to her lower back when crossing the street, the man who ran warm water for her bath after her double shifts. That man had buried another man in the woods and kept eating dinner like the world hadn't moved. She told a friend. The friend told a cousin. The cousin called in an anonymous tip. January 7th, 2021. 2 unmarked vehicles. 2 arrests. Malik, whose real name was DeMarco, and his twin brother, Kian Lattimore. They weren't formally charged. Not yet. But something about DeMarco's calmness, the way he didn't ask why, didn't reach for a lawyer, didn't even blink, it unsettled detectives. They asked him, "Where were you on the night of September 29th, 2017? He shrugged. "I don't remember." "Do you know a man named Tony Parsons?" In the hallway, during a procedural shuffle between rooms, he saw Tierra once. She saw him too. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. 3 weeks later, just before dawn, the recovery team returned to the edge of that wooded trail. The one with the sloping brush, the forgotten path, the frostbitten can, and the ground, after 4 years, had finally shifted. Enough to show them everything. August 4th, 2022. It wasn't a courtroom. It wasn't even related to Tony Parsons. It was a small, windowless interview room in Edinburgh, part of a separate assault investigation. A gray metal table, a single blinking recorder, and a detective who asked a question that had nothing to do with a dead cyclist. But that's when Kian Lattimore said the name. Soft, almost inaudible. Tony Parsons. The detective paused, shifted forward. Kian didn't look up. He just kept talking. He said Tony wasn't supposed to be there. Said they were parked near Bridge of Orkney. Smoking. Arguing. They thought he was filming them. Maybe to report them. He wouldn't stop asking if they needed help. Kian said it felt off. Too many questions. Too close. Then DeMarco, the one who called himself Malik now, stepped forward and told Tony to mind his business. Tony wouldn't. That's when, Kian said, he got loud. And DeMarco snapped. It was quick. Loud. Final. Kian said it wasn't premeditated. But he also said something else, and the detective caught it. There were people we didn't want knowing where we were. That's all I'll say. The body was dragged off the trail. The bike pushed into a gully. They thought rain would cover the rest. They didn't take anything from him. Didn't even check his wallet. It wasn't about money. It was about erasure. We panicked, Kian whispered. We just kept going. In court, months later, Denise sat in the front row. Black blazer, white blouse, a folded photo of Malcolm and his father on his shoulders tucked into her palm. The audio played. Kian's voice, hollow through the speakers, distorted slightly by the courtroom system, filled the silence. We didn't know who he was. We just needed him gone. Denise never cried. Not in public. She kept her head straight, her jaw clenched, her fingers tightening around the frame. It was all the grief she needed to show. Tony was a veteran, a father, a man with bad knees who still rode 170 kilometers to prove something to himself. They didn't know his name, but they took everything from him anyway. In March of 2023, the courtroom in Sterling was quiet before the jury ever entered. The seats were filled, but no one spoke above a whisper. No reporters shouted. No family cried aloud. There was just that kind of silence that sits in corners. The kind that arrives after too many years of waiting for one answer. DeMarco Lattimore, Kian Lattimore, both charged with murder. Both charged with concealing a body. Neither looked at each other. On the second day of testimony, the prosecution played the audio. Not a reenactment. Not a paraphrased confession. Kian's voice. Gravel-throated. Dry. Caught during a separate assault interrogation the year before. We didn't mean to kill nobody. We just told him to stop filming. He started saying things. My brother hit him first. I helped drag him off the road. That's it. That's all I got. And then, we took the bike. Just dumped it. Figured no one would know who he was. That was the moment the jury leaned forward. Not to judge, not to react. But because now they knew what Tony Parsons heard just before his final breath. That he was mistaken for a threat. Then treated like nothing. The Red Bull can was recovered from the site. Still intact. A marker left by a woman who once believed in one of them. A forensic analyst took the stand next. The rusted brake cables. The worn helmet strap. The ligature marks inconsistent with a fall. Blood found inside the leather sole of Malik's boot. Matched to Tony. But it was Denise Parsons who steadied the room. She didn't weep. She didn't look away. She simply stepped up and said, My husband was a gentle man. Not perfect, but kind. He served. He gave. And he was taken like he was worth nothing. Malcolm sat beside her, not with a camera, but with his hands balled tight around the strap. A photograph of his father's bike hung from his neck. He never raised it once. On the 11th day, the verdict came down. Guilty. Of murder. Of concealment. Of taking from a family more than just time. The judge did not soften his voice. This was not a robbery. This was rage. And you left a mother and son searching the shadows of a country for years. Malik blinked, but didn't speak. Davion clenched his jaw and turned away. And as bailiffs moved to take them both, Tierra stood in the far back of the gallery. Not crying. Just watching. No longer holding the weight of their secret. After the sentencing, Malcolm walked to the edge of the courtroom steps. He didn't say much. Just whispered to no one in particular. We can bury him now. But we'll never really lay him to rest. They buried what was left of him in late spring. Quietly. No press. No cameras. Just folded flags and folded hands. Denise wore the same navy coat she'd worn the day he left. She said it was the last thing he hugged. Malcolm, standing beside her, never let go of the camera, not to film, but to hold. Like memory had weight. In the months that followed, Denise did what she knew how to do. She built something. Not a memorial, but a mission. A community grant for displaced veterans. She named it Chief's Walk Home. Malcolm, now 26, turned grief into narrative. He wrote and directed a short documentary, The Man Who Rode Alone. It premiered at a local college theater. The closing line? A still photo of the red can in the grass. No music. Just wind. Every year, on September 29th, they return to Fort William. It's never announced. No signs. No hashtags. Just them. They light a candle at the trailhead. Denise says a prayer. Malcolm presses record. Not for others, just to remember. Last year, a boy joined them. 13. Son of a vet who got help through the fund. He stood quiet, watching the flame flicker in the highland air. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in the earth, but in the weight of the loss. Tony Parsons, once just a name on a case file, had become more than a victim. He became a reason, a return point, a place to begin again.